This is Belize, a tiny country in Central America. Beautiful beaches, wild jungles, and ancient ruins. But here's the crazy part. For most of history, this place wasn't even supposed to exist. Spain claimed it, British settled it, pirates hid out here, and Guatemala still says it's theirs. So how did Belize survive all of that and end up independent? That's the story we're gonna dive into. And I promise you, it's way more interesting than you think. Let's start from the beginning. Long before Europeans showed up, Belize was part of the Mayan world. At sites like Caracol, the Maya built these massive stone cities in the middle of the jungle. Imagine this: temples taller than the trees, plazas filled with thousands of people, kings carving their victories into stones. And the Maya weren't just building pretty pyramids, they were engineers. They dug canals through swamps, built reservoirs, and grew enough foods to feed cities bigger than modern Belize. But around the year 900s, something happened. Cities like Caracol started to empty. Drought, war, politics, historians debated. But here's what matters. The Maya people didn't vanish. They stayed, they adapted, and their descendants are still here, part of Belize's identity today. Okay, jump ahead to the 1600s. Spain claims this land, but they never actually controlled it. Too swampy, too hard to settle, and no gold. Perfect conditions for pirates. English pirates and buccaneers started hiding out in Belize rivers and keys. They waited for Spanish treasure ships, ambushed them, and then disappeared them into mangroves. Now, depending on who you ask, these guys were either heroes or criminals. To the English crown, they were useful when they attacked Spain. To the Spanish, they were pests. To locals, probably terrifying. But when piracy slowed down, they found a new hustle: logwood. Yeah, a tree. It sounds boring, but hear me out. In Europe, logwood made this deep black and purple dye colors, reserved for the wealthy. So suddenly, this swampy little corner of Central America became super valuable. These rough settlers, called the Baymen, hacked logwood in the swamps. And this was nasty work. Mosquitoes, crocodiles, sweltering heat. Once the trees were cut, they floated the logs downriver, tied them into rocks, and pulled them out of the sea, where ships carried them into Europe. But here's the darker part. The Baymen didn't do it alone. They used enslaved Africans to do the heaviest, most dangerous work. Over time, the logwood trade slowed down, but mahogany took over. And mahogany? That was the gold of the 18th century. Mahogany furniture in Europe was like today's iPhones. Everyone wanted it, and it showed off your wealth. But again, it came at a brutal cost. Enslaved Africans dragged these massive logs through the jungle, sometimes miles at a time, before floating them to the coast. This was backbreaking, dangerous work, but the slave people resisted. They showed the pace, escaped, built new lives in hidden communities, or blended with the Garifuna and Maya. And then, in 1834, Britain abolished slavery. By 1838, Belize's enslaved population was legally free. This changed everything. Freed Africans and their descendants formed the core of Creole culture, language, music, politics, a huge part of what makes Belize, Belize today. Now, you gotta hear about this. In 1798, Spain decided to make one last push to kick the British out of Belize. They sent warships, soldiers, the whole deal. The Baymen? They weren't trained soldiers, they were loggers and ex-pirates. But with help from their enslaved allies, they stood their ground. For 10 days, they clashed with Spain's force near St. George's Key. And on September 10th, the Baymen won. The victory is still celebrated in Belize today as a national holiday. It became a symbol of defiance, of carving out an identity in the face of bigger empires. Meanwhile, up north in Mexico, a huge war broke out, La Guerra de Castas, the Caste War of Yucatan. This was in 1847. Maya communities rose up against Spanish and Mestizo elites. It turned into one of the bloodiest conflicts in the Americas. 10 of the thousands fled south. Many Mestizos families crossed into Belize. They settled up north, bringing Spanish language, Catholic traditions, and farming techniques. This is why today, in northern Belize, you will hear more Spanish, see Mestizo traditions, and find towns that grew directly out of this migration. Now let's talk treaties, because this is where Guatemala enters the picture. In 1763, the Treaty of Paris let the British cut logwood here, but no towns, no forts. In 1786, another treaty expanded those rights. And in 1859, Britain and Guatemala signed a treaty that fixed Belize borders. But here's the catch. The treaty also said Britain would build a road from Guatemala City to the Caribbean. That road never got built. And Guatemala later said, wait a second, no road, no deal. Belize is still ours. That claim stuck around. And it's why Guatemala still points to history when arguing Belize should belong to them. By the 20th century, Belize was still a British colony called British Honduras, but things were starting to change. In 1961, Hurricane Hati devastated Belize City. Thousands lost their homes. The government decided to move the capital inland to what we call now Belmapan. At the same time, a young leader named George Price was rising. He founded the People United Party, rallied workers, and demanded self-rule. Price was smart. He didn't just fight locally, he went international. He built ties with the Caribbean, lobbied the United Nations, and gathered support from the countries around the world. Guatemala threatened invasion more than once, but the UN backed Belize. CARICOM backed Belize. Even the non-allied movement, countries like India and Yugoslavia, threw a support behind Price. And finally, on September 21, 1981, Belize became independent. Fireworks, parades, the Belize flag flying high for the first time. But the dispute wasn't over. Today, Belize is a multicultural democracy of about 400,000 people. English is the official language, but you'll also hear Creole, Spanish, Garifuna, and the Maya languages. Tourism is huge, especially the Barrier Reef, which is part of the largest barrier reef in the Western Hemisphere. But Guatemala claims hasn't gone away. In 2019, Belize held a referendum. Should the International Court of Justice decide the case? The people voted yes. So now, the ICJ has the final say. But here's the thing, Belize isn't just lines on a map. It's centuries of Maya, pirates, slaves, migrators, and independence movement. It's a country built by its people, not by treaties. So, should Belize be considered independent? It already is. It fought it, it earned it, and it lives it every day. Belize is not Guatemala's leftover to claim. It is not a British colony. It is Belize. Independent, sovereign, and proud.